Hello, friends and beautiful people. It is Kathryn Hello, hello, hello. We are in episode 10 of All Things Ascension. Let's see who's going to jump on here. And I want to make sure I'm live. This Facebook is being weird today. There I am. Hello, hello, hello. Kathryn Massell here, 5D Visionary, Elevated Consciousness Coach. We're going to talk about one of my favorite things. Hi, Joanna. Which is, well, number one, time. But I got a little helmet head happening today. But we're going to talk about bending time. And we're going to talk about harmonic time compression and expansion. What those two things are. This is something that I teach in, if you haven't been following me and you don't know who I am, I have a signature program that I teach and it's called Timelines Expanded Masterclass. And this is one of the modules that I teach. In fact, I just taught this as module 3 in this program. But I don't really consider this to be proprietary information, meaning I don't keep it secret and just part of my paid course. I actually have a couple videos on YouTube already about bending time. There was a podcast episode back last year when I had my podcast. I had an episode on there about bending time. And then I have a quick little video that I created right on the heels of doing some time bending with my husband when he was going to an interview. And so this is something that I keep building on my knowledge with this, and when I do, I like to share it with you guys because it's fun. This is one of the fun things about, learning how to opt out of certain structures that have kept our imagination, our creativity kind of tethered and confined and contracted. And time is one of those things we think of as being very rigid and inflexible, when in fact it's quite elastic and malleable. It's just that we're coming at it from a level of perception, which is the 3D time-space matrix, where it is kind of confined. It is a little bit rigid and inflexible the way we've been taught to approach it. But in fact, time is really, really flexible. And time is really fun to play with. But you just have to opt out of a certain level of perception, meaning you opt out of your 3D avatar of self and move into your God self or your higher self and access time at that level. And then you have all kinds of fun stuff that you can play with time. You can merge timelines, you can collapse timelines, you can activate higher potential timelines, more desirable timelines for yourself. You can bend time, meaning you can slow it down or you can speed it up. And that's what we're going to play with here today. So some of you who are watching are already in my Timelines Expanded Masterclass, and so welcome for coming and getting the second installment of this. And I'll talk about this in a way where we don't go as deep as we do in the class, but you'll still come away from this talk today with some new tools that you didn't possess before, and learn how to play with time in a way that's really fun, it's really tangible, it's really hands-on, and it has practical everyday benefits for you by learning how to play with time. Especially if you're someone who is always late. Maybe you're someone who is never on time for things, and you always seem to be running out of time, or you're trying to fit a lot of things in your day and you wish you had more time. We have an interesting thing because we're moving into accelerated frequencies. Clock time, or what we think of as physical time, linear time, measured time, is collapsing. So we have an interesting ability at this point to be able to play with time in ways that we never have before, just by the nature of harmonic time compression and expansion, which I'm going to talk about. So bending time is learning how to play with the malleable structure of time that is beyond the linear continuum of time that we think of here in 3D. So I invite you to think about, just close your eyes and think about a grid, an x-axis, which is horizontal and linear, and a y-axis, which is vertical and goes up. okay? So if you think of horizontal linear time as physical time, clock time, something that follows a continuum. You know, when we think of linear horizontal time, what we're really talking about is a measure of relative motion between two or more objects or states of reality. I like to talk about these objects or states of reality as events or experiences. And it's in between these events or experiences that happen in our lives where we have this buffer. It's a time block. It's a chunk of time, would be one way to think about it. And it's in that chunk of time that we decide on the nature of those events or experiences and how we respond or react to them. And we end up, over time, creating a personal identity, a personal reality for ourselves based on our responses to those events, states of reality, objects. And this is time by the clock. This is calendar time. This is measured time. This is man-made time. And here as us as humans in 3D reality, we are the creators of time. We are the perpetuators of time. And I talk about this. We are like the keepers of time here in 3D. We created this measured clock time. We are the keepers of it, and we perpetuate that. And just as we've created it, we can uncreate it, and we can unbecome who we've become as a result of clock time or measured time. So time by the clock, calendar time, measured time, this is useful in our everyday lives because it has allowed us to create meaning for ourselves, okay? I'm so excited to learn today. Thank you so much for showing up. Thank you. And thanks for everybody who wanted to show up yesterday and I couldn't make it. Life happens. Client appointments get moved around here and there, but I wanted to bring this to you guys because it is just so helpful and I'm glad that you're here. So that is the x-axis of time, that linear time, that measurement of relative motion between two or more objects or states of reality, okay? And we've come to define our existence and who we think we are within this structure that we've made kind of rigid and inflexible. But then we also have nonlinear time. This is also called spiritual time. This is also called the eternal now. This is vertical time. So in that grid, I ask you to imagine the x-axis is what I described first as measured linear clock time. But non-linear time, vertical time, on the y-axis is the eternal now. And the eternal now is spiritual time, meaning anything that's really beyond 4D, because we still have linear time in 4D, although it's kind of like the gateway to moving into non-linear time in kind of practice and application. But basically anything beyond the threshold of 5D is considered part of the eternal now. It does not follow the same rules of engagement as linear time does. It's very flexible, it's very open, it's very playful, okay? And when you're in this y-axis of the eternal now, this encompasses everything that we think of as linear time. The eternal now exists throughout all dimensions of reality, even in 3D. It's just that that is not our focus and attention here in 3D. Clock or measured time is, because that's what we've been told. And that's what we've created and perpetuated. And it's like we have a collective agreement about what time is as humans. And we all kind of agree with time in our minds and our bodies in a linear way. But in truth, non-linear time encompasses this smaller sphere of reality that is linear time, okay? And from a certain perspective, the only time there is the eternal now, the y-axis or non-linear time, because it encompasses everything else that gets fragmented or highly structured within that. You guys following me so far? And I'm going to try to keep this nice and easy. I could go way down the rabbit hole with this stuff, but I want to make this stuff kind of tangible and at least give you a foundation or a base from which to understand how this works, okay? So the eternal now is the larger universal expression of time, and it encompasses everything else. So when you understand that there is this nonlinear time, the eternal now, you can understand natural harmonic time compression and expansion. So we have a sense of time. We have physical measured time, which is clock time, calendar time, where it's measured, right? But we also have a sense of time, meaning if I say to you, hey, I'll be there in 5 minutes, you may not sit there just watching your clock the whole time. You may have a felt sense. We do have a felt sense in your body. That's called psychological time. So when someone says to you, I'll be there in 5 minutes, you're like, okay, I have a sense for that. I'm going to go and putter and do a couple things that I think is going to take 5 minutes, and then I'll meet you and we'll go do our thing, right? That's psychological time. And when we are understanding psychological time and how that has a felt or sensed knowing for us, we can have different ways of playing within that. Now, when we move into higher dimensional realities, time speeds up. This is a natural process of the accelerated energies of higher dimensions. Higher dimensions move at a very, very fast rate, okay? So that means, and I'll give you an example of this, if you're talking about time in 5D, it has different rules of engagement because it moves much faster. In other words, our felt or psychological sense of time in that realm is very sped up, okay? And this should clue you into maybe certain things, experiences in your life now that feel like they're moving quite quickly now. As you're naturally accessing a higher frequency, because the earth herself is moving into a higher vibrational state, that means you are too, because you're part of Mothership Earth. She is of us, we are of her. We ascend together. We go through stages of frequency upgrades together. So as we do that, we have a different sense of time. And so a good example would be when you think of maybe a healing experience that you're having in your life. Maybe you're moving through certain things that have been part of your reality before, and you're clearing or releasing certain things. What would have felt like maybe 10 years ago that something took a really long time to do is now feeling like you're going through it in a weekend or a week or a couple months maybe, right? Does that make sense? This is because you're naturally moving along with this harmonic time compression or expansion dynamic that comes with the territory of moving into a higher frequency or accessing a higher dimensional state of being, okay? So with harmonic time compression, this is the tendency of psychological time to move faster at higher levels of consciousness or in higher dimensions, okay? Another example of this would be when you think of working with an ascended master. Good, I always use Archangel Michael because he's pretty universally known in terms of, people ask for his help a lot. Archangel Michael, he's a wonder guy and he's in high demand. So how can he be helping all these people all over the planet who are helping him at once? And that's just this planet. Maybe he's off planet doing other things too, right? And he's not a singular entity. He's a spectrum of consciousness that is accessible because he's a pretty big bandwidth. He has a lot of energy, okay? But because he is of a higher dimensional realm, he has the ability to expand and compress time at will because he's naturally part of a higher frequency. So when he works with a lot of different people who are asking for his help at once, what he's doing is actually kind of expanding time, slowing it down, so we can work with a lot of different people at once and then compress that back to kind of ground that energy where those people are. I know that sounds confusing, but another way to think of it is in the Bible, when they are talking about in Genesis, the earth being created, God created the earth in 7 days. Well, when you think of God as a dimensional being, you think of him as being, or her, it, as a very high dimensional being, yes? Accessing at least 12D, but in all honesty, probably much higher than that. So think about if time is that much accelerated as you go through all the different dimensions, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12D, time would move very, very fast to a being who is of 12-dimensional realm, yes? So the earth being created in 7 days to that God being might be 1 billion years, okay? So this is just to give you some idea of how this works, what this translates as. But what we're talking about here, really, guys, is kind of non-linear. So I invite you to move beyond the linear mind to embody this information and to take it in, because intellectualizing this stuff, you're going to just try to speak to that 3D avatar of you, and that's not the part of you that understands how to work with this stuff. It is your God self being. So just call in your God self as you're listening to me here. Call in your higher self. This is very easy to do. You just close your eyes, take a deep breath, relax yourself, and just call in your God self being. Call in that part of you that already understands and is remembering what I'm talking about here. And try to get it here instead of here, okay? So natural harmonic time expansion. This refers to the ability to expand psychological time. In other words, to slow it down, okay? This is to stack time, and I'll explain that in a minute. Like during the dream state, you may take like a 60 or a 90-minute nap, right? And maybe you went really deep in that 60 to 90 minutes where you're taking that nap. You went to different worlds. You're experiencing different star systems. Maybe you're visiting parallel lifetimes. You're doing all this stuff. And you wake up from this 90-minute nap and you're like, I just went to all these places. I lived several lifetimes in 90 minutes. That's natural time expansion. That's natural harmonic time expansion. It is to stack time, meaning you're kind of creating a situation where you are manipulating time in order to establish more within a given period of linear time, okay? So when I explain this to people, we might get a felt sense of it that is beyond the linear mind, beyond the intellect, right? Beyond our need to rationalize and analyze everything. But some people are really visual. So I like to use this incredibly sophisticated tool, which is a folded piece of paper, to explain the difference between natural time compression and natural harmonic time expansion. So when you think about slowing down or stretching time, this is to stack it, okay? So think about a period of time, let's just say an hour. And let's say you want to do two different things with that hour. In that 1 hour, let's just say you have to be somewhere in an hour and you left late. You left late, you got in your car, you're supposed to be somewhere in less than an hour now, and you're going to be late. You're sure you're going to be late. And all those familiar feelings come in like, oh my God, I'm going to get fired, or, you know, I'm letting this person down, or what a heel I am for not leaving on time, all this other stuff, right? And you start to panic and you start to feel the rush. And then all that cortisol and all of those, you know, hormones start that soup in your body that makes you go into that fight or flight and stress response, right? But what you can do in that moment is say, stop the rush. And you take a breath and you go into that God self perspective that I just walked you through, or higher self. But you want to move out of your 3D avatar state, because the 3D avatar is what keeps you in that fight or flight. It keeps you in that cortisol response where you go through that cascade of stress response in the body, and you're in that survival mode and you're in a hurry, okay? You just say, stop the rush, and just call in God self, God self, God self. And maybe you're in your car, maybe you're driving, okay? And here's that hour. What you could think about is this folded piece of paper. And you can imagine slowing down time. Imagine you're taking this hour, which is maybe a flat piece of paper, and you're folding it accordion-like, like this. But maybe you're just in that place where you stop the rush and you say, always on time with plenty of time. And then think about yourself exploring like all of these folds, all of these corners and crevices, and slowing down time, because the more you sit within this hour and make it kind of structured, like give yourself something to explore within it. And that's why I'm using a piece of paper folded accordion-like can do that for you. Imagine like exploring this fold here and hanging out for a little bit, or this corner, and really stretching it out. Maybe even stretching this out so it feels like 2 hours maybe instead of 1 hour. You can get yourself calm. You can get yourself clear. You can detach from the outcome. And what you're exploring in those spaces could be, you know what? I'm going to get there and the person I'm meeting, they're not even going to be there on time. You know, what if they're caught in traffic too? Or what if they left too? Wouldn't that be nice if we laughed about it? And detached from all those feelings of, I'm going to get fired. I'm not going to find a place to park. I'm going to be rushing out of the car. I'll probably snag my skirt on something as I'm going in. Or, you know, it's slippery in the parking lot. I'm afraid I might fall on the ice because I'm rushing around too much or whatever. Let go of all that stuff. All of the ego fear, everything that's creating a distortion to you being in that higher vantage point of self, your God self. Stop the rush is a great prompt. And then saying, always on time with plenty of time. Because where you are, when you elevate your state like that, you're creating a different signature of you. You're creating a different electromagnetic signature of you. And when you're in this state where you stop the rush and you're in the God self, what you're doing is you're entering that higher dimensional frequency of you where you have the ability to play with and manipulate the time fields. It's only in this state. But you have to stop the rush to do that. You have to get out of the 3D avatar of self to do that. So start playing with all the things that are maybe the higher outcome of exploring this space. And you could be doing this while you're driving in a car. I used to do this all the time because I used to be late for stuff all the time. And I would just say, always on time with plenty of time. And I would sing a little song about it, you know, make it kind of cute. I would whistle and just slow everything down, slow my breath down. And I would access this different electromagnetic signature of self. That part of self, the God self, the higher self, whatever you want to call it, that already knows how to manipulate the time fields. There is a fragment of your consciousness, many actually, fragments of your consciousness, that already know how to play with the time fields and manipulate them in this way. So all you're doing is tapping into that, and it's through the essence. So you have to let go of the ego fear. You have to let go of the doubt and the overwhelm. And understand that you're accessing a very elastic nature of time. You're accessing, essentially, time ahead of itself. Because when you're moving into the God self perspective and you're in that higher dimensional frequency of consciousness, where you have the ability to manipulate time fields, you are in a higher dimension. 3D is a lower vibration, meaning it takes longer to get to 3D. There's a big time buffer between things that happen in 3D versus when things happen or how they happen, events occur in 5D, 6D, 7D, 8D. So when you're your God self aspect like this, and you're slowing down time, and you're thinking about all of the good outcomes that can happen about arriving at that place. You found the great parking spot. The person that you're meeting is just wonderful, and you have a great exchange. You're making magic together by just meeting up. And it's a beautiful day. The sun is shining. You're calm in your breath. You're in a great car that's reliable and it's getting to your destination safely. Think about all of the things that are going right in that moment. You're accessing a higher frequency of you. That means you're accessing a part of you that is in a different dimension. And in a different dimension where time is sped up, you are accessing time ahead of itself. You are accessing time ahead of itself before it becomes fixed in the density of 3D. This is the place where you have the room to play. This is a totally different buffer zone, okay? You are hooked into your God self avatar, and you're accessing at the very least 4D time, which is already ahead of 3D dimensionally and in an accelerated frequency. And at this elevated dimensional expression of time, it's less dense, it's less fixed, it's less rigid than 3D time. So you're creating that imprint in a higher dimension, and then you're just kind of bringing it back into 3D and grounding yourself in that. When you do this, you can also say something that maybe some of you, this will really hit home for you. You'll say, stop the rush, always on time with plenty of time, access all those good feelings that I was just talking about. But you can also say, time doesn't exist yet. I'm not trapped inside it. This works for me really powerfully because it reminds me I'm accessing a higher dimensional frequency of me. I'm accessing a different avatar of self that's in an accelerated vibration. So the things that are happening to me in 3D, they haven't happened yet. I'm accessing it here, and I'm creating the template for what I want to happen, what I can see and feel happening, and I'm creating that in that dimensional space, and then I'll bring it back down and ground it into 3D. Does that make sense? So you can work with this another way. You can also accelerate or move time ahead to a more desired moment. Great example is, and maybe we don't have these situations too much anymore, but you're at work, you're in a boring meeting, or you're sitting and doing something that you just don't really like doing. Maybe you're doing your taxes. Maybe you're sitting down and doing your budget or your bills for the month, and it's not something that you really like to do, but you have to do it. It's something that needs to get done. It's something you have to sit through and do. So what you can do in that moment is you can accelerate or move time ahead to a more desired moment. Again, it's the same kind of cue to get yourself in this space. You access your God self, you take a deep breath, you stop watching the clock. If you're a clock watcher, I highly recommend stop watching the clock, because that's what keeps you fixed in your 3D avatar of self and makes you keep perpetuating that belief that time is fixed or inflexible. Stop being a clock watcher. For some of you, maybe you want to stop wearing a watch entirely. I try not to wear mine too much anymore. But you can access time ahead of itself in this way where you're accelerating time. Go into your God self aspect. Go into the breath. Cue yourself into the now. But then you can just say, God self, God self, God self. God self, God self, God self. God self, God self, God self. And feel that subtle switch. Feel that shift. And then focus on the feeling or state of being that is more desirable than, let's just say, you sitting and doing your taxes at the moment, or sitting in a boring meeting where your boss is droning on, or sitting and doing your budget for the month because it's just really boring and you don't like it. What's the next best feeling? For some, it's easier to go right into gratitude, because that's the next best feeling always, and it's always accessible because there's always something to be grateful for. Drawing breath, being healthy in your body, being safe in your home, being surrounded with people that you like, having hot water in your shower, having a delicious cup of coffee in the morning. There's a million trillion things to be grateful for. So that's usually the next best feeling. And then allow yourself to just keep kind of climbing the ladder of the feeling. What's the next best feeling after that? What's the next best state of being after that? What is more desired by you than what is happening now? Maybe there's something happening later on that you're looking forward to. Maybe your friend promised to take you out for a nice late lunch when you're done with your obligations for the day, or your husband's going to take you out for a happy hour cocktail, or any number of things. You're going for a nice walk in the woods, whatever that is. What's the feeling or the essence of that next best thing that's coming later on? Feel it now. Bring that feeling in now. And then say, this is a precious moment. I choose to enjoy now as it is happening. And you can say, I unstack time to access what I prefer. Meaning, if it's stacked in the accordion-like and really stretched out, imagine just collapsing that. You can use the piece of paper visual in your mind that you're taking this hour that it's taking you to finish your obligations that aren't so good, aren't so fun, right? And imagine stacking it. So you're not exploring the spaces in between anymore. You're moving from this potential to this potential, and look how close they are to each other. This is accessing the feeling of the next best thing. This is what allows you to kind of jump time and collapse it, okay? I unstack time to access what I prefer to experience the most. I unstack time to access what I prefer to experience the most. Or I accelerate time to experience what benefits me the most, okay? How does that feel? Does that seem like something you can do? Does that feel outlandish? Does it feel like something that is accessible to you? Why or why not? The only way you can really bring this home and embody it is to experience it yourself, is to play with it. Remember, slowing down time is to stretch it out, and that's harmonic time expansion, expanding time. To unstack or accelerate time is harmonic time compression, folding it back in on itself. So you're not exploring all the spaces in between anymore. You're going from right here to right here. It's always the feeling that is going to bring you there. The feeling, the emotion, the essence of something is what time stamps anything. This is true whether we are playing in our 3D avatar of self and experiencing time as being rigid and inflexible, or we're in our 5D, 6D, 7D, 8D, 9D, 10D avatar of self. The common denominator is always the essence. It is always the feeling. That is what time stamps anything. And it's usually what's being time stamped is that when we have an overriding emotion, a theme, an emotional theme in our lives, this is maybe time stamping our whole personal reality for us, our whole identity, our whole worldview. If you keep changing the timestamp to something that's more favorable, that ends up becoming the emotional narrative or the emotional theme. But that's always the key to changing your conversation with time as well. Does that make sense? Do you guys have questions about that? To be able to slow down or stretch time, you're stacking it. It's like you could imagine like a stack of magazines too, okay? How much time would it take you to read through a stack of old magazines? A lot of time. You're stacking it. To unstack it, maybe you removed that stack of magazines by a third. It's going to take you a lot less time to get through those magazines, right? Okay. This is just one way to talk about this, but I've played with this a lot, and my guides have helped me a lot with, because they know in the way that I teach how important it is for me to make maybe these esoteric concepts seem relatable and to make sense in your life. Because if it doesn't make sense in your life, then all this stuff is just academic. Time is experiential. So we have to have an experience of it. So to play with these potentials in this way is to not only, number one, realize how empowering that is, that you have the ability to change your identity of self through how you play with time. You start to realize how much time creates a signature of who we are. But that's really empowering when you realize there's flexibility within that, maybe in ways you never thought. And just playing with something like this that seems like so simple, you know, it kind of seems like child's play. I call this the Tinker Toys of time bending, of working with time, because it's like a toy. But it's very simple. It's once you play with it and get used to it and start trusting it, it becomes incredibly valuable as well. Because it can change the meaning that you've created for yourself around your life, your worldview, your perception of reality, how you conceive of things in your life, meaning how you go about creating or manifesting things in your life. It changes all of that. It can't not. To intuitively learn is to experience. Right, and everything about moving into higher dimensional realms, different frequency vibrations, is about having a different conversation with consciousness. When you learn to play with time in this way, it changes the conversation that you're having with all of consciousness. So everything that's related to that, every area of your life, you know, whether it's interpersonal, the relationship you have with yourself, or personal in terms of relations that you have with your friends, your family, your loved ones, your romantic partners, your sexual partners, the way you look at money, how you maybe even make money, how you have a relationship with your emotions, your mental fields, your thought fields. It changes all of that. But it has to come down to, how do I want to play with the feeling? Like, we've all been in that place where maybe we were late for something, and that feeling of panic, right? It starts to cascade into all these different areas of our life. If I'm not on time for this meeting, this interview, I'm not going to get a job. I'm not going to be able to pay my rent. I'm not going to be able to get the groceries that I want to get. My nice organic produce, I won't be able to afford that anymore, right? Or won't be able to get this car I'm looking forward to getting. And then that means I'm a loser. That means that, I'm a loser at life. We start conflating it with all of these other things in our life, okay? And time is one of those structures within which that we do all of that. So if you change the relationship you're having with time as a structure, you're changing your relationship with everything that you're having within that structure. Does that make sense? So I invite you to think about that and have fun with this. Play with it. Like I said, when I teach this in my program, we go into it in a little more detail, but not that much. You're getting the gist of it here. But start looking at, if you do want to play with this and do want to, have the experience of bending time, harmonic time, compression, and expansion, and play with it. Start thinking about how this is tethered to so many different ways you define your life or how you perceive of your whole identity or reality. How would you suggest playing with time and these outlets, shifting that there are pure ways to make money? Well, one really fun way is if you can slow yourself down using the example. I don't know if you were here for the whole talk, Crystal, but I talk about how you access the state where you start being in the frequency where time is more malleable. You can tell whether or not to speed up time by looking at other people. Yes, you can. Whatever your point of reference is, start playing with that. Why is that the point of reference that it is for you? Why is it calling your attention or focus at the moment? Where is that maybe an invitation that I can change this conversation in terms of maybe I have a judgment about something or a person. How did it get there? Usually because we've created some sort of identity for ourselves in between the events or experiences in our life, two relative things that are in motion or static, okay? But getting back to Crystal's question, you can also use this to say, in the statement that I used, always on time with plenty of time, I swap this out sometimes and say always in the money with plenty of money. Again, it's about slowing down yourself in the moment, getting yourself under control. You can't do this stuff without some level of emotional mastery, and the only way to move towards emotional mastery is practice, okay? And remember, the emotion is the secret sauce here. That is what connects you in. So you have to get in control of your emotions. So if you're in panic, you're in doubt, you're in overwhelm, you're in ego fear, you have to gain control and reclaim your energy. Take a deep breath in, connect with the breath, connect with your body in time and space, meaning you connect with your body in time very easily by connecting with the breath. Connect with your body in space. This is where I am. I'm sitting in a chair. I feel the temperature of the room on me. This will always lead you to the moment where you are present. You are in the eternal now. You're beyond linear time. You're in the sphere of the universal time matrix, which encompasses everything within it, okay? You're accessing the y-axis, the eternal now of time. And get really present. What is the emotion? What is the frequency I'm desiring? Whether you're late for something or whether you want to move time ahead and access something that happens later on now. Because there only is now. Only and ever. There is now. The difference always in thinking about the past or the future is the timestamp that we're giving it. If something is better in the future, it's always that emotional tether that connects us there. If something sucked in our past, then it's always the emotional tether that's connecting us there. But you're never not feeling it anywhere other than now. Does that make sense? So how you are in the now will allow you to access something by virtue. You can change something in your past by what you're willing to feel now and what you're desiring now. Okay? You access the emotion, and you can say, just like I used with the time example, Crystal, always in the money with plenty of money. Just swap out always with time and plenty of time, or always on time with plenty of time, always in the money with plenty of money, always with love and plenty of love, always with support and plenty of support. Whatever it is, you can really do whatever you want with it. Does that make sense? I've actually slowed down time by simply saying I want more time, and 5 minutes seem like 20. Yes, yes. But we have to be in a place of allowing. And if we're in the ego fear, or we're, switching on certain outcomes that put us in panic, you're not going to be able to play with that energy in the same way. It's going to feel forced, and you probably won't be able to enter that state. It's about accessing the state of being that feels open. It feels like you're in flow. It just feels like you're accepting, you're allowing, you're expanding yourself in essence. And we have to play with this space of harnessing this. I know this is big stuff, but once you start playing with this, you start to realize how easy it is. And believing that it can happen. Actually, yes, that is very, very true, Shannon. Believing that it can happen. That's where the trust and the allowing comes in, right? Because if we don't believe in it, chances are we're not going to trust, we're not going to surrender, we're not going to allow. And we're not even going to be in a place of receiving in the first place. We're not going to let ourselves, allow the reception of something better. Especially if we're that kind of person that if we're chronically late for stuff and we think, oh my God, I did it again. God, I'm such a loser, right? That's not in a space where you're accessing your higher avatar of self, is it? No. You have to let go of whatever is tethering you to the 3D avatar of self. It could be a survival mode instinct of like being in panic, doubt, overwhelm, etc. You have to be willing to let go of that. And the only way to do it is get yourself really present and focus on what's the timestamp here that will allow me to play with this tool and access a more desirable timeline. It's always going to be the emotion. That's always the secret sauce, okay? And you can ask yourself, I like to provide affirmations for people. So some people just struggle with this. I can't possibly do that. I can't play with time. Like, we've become so habituated and conditioned to thinking that time is flexible or inflexible. It's so rigid. It's such a structure that creates this like really rigid experience, right? And everything is relegated to time, right? We think time is just a consequence of life. No, time creates the consequences of life. So if you learn to play with the flexible nature of time, you're playing with different consequences for your life, okay? So I have this thing that I share, they're called affirmations. They're different than affirmations because these are in the form of a question versus a confirmed statement. So when we say an affirmation, a very popular affirmation would be, I am wealthy, right? What happens when you say something like that and you're not wealthy? Your subconscious kicks in and is like, right? Have you looked at your bank account lately? You're not wealthy, right? Remember all those bills you have to pay? They're sitting on your dining room table, stacking up, collecting dust because you can't pay them. You're not wealthy. Okay. So for some people who have those struggles with affirmations can be really helpful. So you could say, why am I so wealthy? Why am I so abundant? Why am I being shown all these ways that prosperity is filtering into my life? Okay. And what it does is it's a pattern interrupt. It's a patterning hack for your subconscious, where it would normally just kick in and be like, yeah, right, you're not wealthy at all. What it starts doing is looking for ways that is so, where that question could be true. So it starts fishing for all of these different ways that this might be true. It's a really interesting patterning hack. So you can do that with this too. Why is it safe for me to unhook from my current limited relationship with time? So some of you are having trouble with thinking like, this sounds great or anything, but that sounds like a load of horseshit. I'm not going to be able to do this. Okay. So this allows you to kind of play with your subconscious and say, well, show me the ways this might be true then. Okay. It's like putting your subconscious to work for you. So you can also say, what if I allow my mind to help me feel less dense in my body. Because when you feel really dense in your body, you're not going to be able to do this. You are completely in the subjective experience of your 3D avatar self, and you've allowed yourself to become conditioned or habituated to that expression of yourself, that level of perception. And hey, you know, it happens. But this is a good affirmation for you if that's the case. What if I allow my mind to help me feel less dense in my body so it's easier to transcend time? And then your subconscious goes, I'm listening, I'm paying attention. What if I let go of my identity of self through my reaction to cyclical moments of time? A lot of our personal reality and identity has been created through a rather reactionary nature. As humans, we're getting better at responding instead of reacting. But historically, we're reactionaries. We react to events and experiences quite keenly. People, triggers, traumas, dramas, etc. What if I let go of my identity of self through my reaction to cyclical moments of time? And if you're reacting in the same way to cyclical moments, mean as things keep happening, the linear continuum of time, as we experience it in 3D, keeps happening. And we keep having the same reaction, the same emotional response to things over and over again. It stops being like a bad mood, right? Then it just becomes who we are. So this starts to unravel that particular statement. And I'll say it again if you want to write it down. What if I let go of my identity of self through my reaction to cyclical moments of time? And that's just a great journal prompt too. And I got another one for you. Why is it so easy to shift into the awareness of my God self, to access a different conversation with time? That's a good one too. Why is it so easy to shift into the awareness of my God self, to access a different conversation with time? And maybe some of you can already feel like, oh, there's some juiciness in there. There's some juicy tidbits in there. Create your own affirmations, especially if what I presented here is something that you feel like you're struggling with. And it doesn't seem like this is tangible or can be playful. Another key is to make this playful, guys. You know, have this kind of childlike sense of wonder and curiosity about this stuff, because that puts you in the right energetic signature to be able to flow with this instead of resist it. Okay? That's why these what if statements can be kind of playful. Get what I'm saying? So I'm going to leave that there. But I have other talks about this that I'll share with you if you want those. They're YouTube videos. And I can attach them here in the comments if you guys want to learn more, play with this more. And this is really perking up your ears. I also am teaching Timelines Expanded live right now. This is the only time this year I'm teaching this 12-module program live. This is my signature program. We're about to talk about false timelines. We just talked about collapsing timelines in Module 2. In Module 1, we talk about how humans create time in 3D, because we are the keepers of 3D. Humans are the keepers of the 3D realm. Every dimensional realm has keepers. And we forget, humans are the keepers of 3D. So we get to change the structures that are here. We've maintained this structure of time as it is, but it's actually, we've outlived it. It's outmoded at this point. It's not serving us in the same way that it used to be, because we are accessing a different level of consciousness. We're activating elevated states of being. And so then linear time within that is kind of out, it's being outmoded. Clock time is collapsing. That's a natural byproduct of moving into a higher frequency, and that is happening now. Definitely a lot of juice. Awesome. I'm glad, Chelsea. And I'm glad everyone who could join me here today was here and was being very interactive. I love that. That helps. And I will put those links for those other videos down in here for you guys to play with more if you like. And if you want to come join us in Timelines Expanded Masterclass, we've got another 9 weeks of it. And it's really like no other class out there. It's like no other program. No one is teaching it in this way, where it's very comprehensive and you get a lot of support And we have our own private Facebook group where you get extra guidance and support as well. So love you guys. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great I'll see you on Sunday for Sunday support. Have a great weekend, and I will see you on Sunday, 1:30 p.m. Pacific time, right here in our group for Sunday support. Bye, guys. Thank you.